Hey guys, what's up and welcome to a very new League of Legends video. So if you have been following me for quite some time, then you are aware that I do have my own top 5 list. But one of my more popular ones is probably my top 5 assassins. Now I tend to try and wait until enough changes have been made to a specific role or type of champions before I release the next top 5 video. And I really do feel like enough changes have been made to the assassins in League of Legends, which definitely merits this video. As a quick disclaimer, remember, these are my personal opinions. These are just the champions that I would personally pick in solo queue, in normals, whatever. So let's go ahead and go straight to the first champion in the number 5 spot, Yasuo. So Yasuo is a champion that finally got buffed after some much needed buffs as well. He's been getting nerfed over and over and over again to a point where I honestly just don't even feel like he should be nerfed. But it looks like Riot have finally seen their mistakes and given this guy some buffs. So if you're unaware, the buffs that they gave him were, first of all, a small increase to his move speed, but the more important one, the static cooldown on his Q is now 4 seconds at all ranks rather than starting at 5 and then decreasing down to 4 at rank 5 Q. What this means now is his laning phase is stronger because you can simply max your E, since there's not many benefits to maxing the Q. There's a lot to say here and I actually have a video specifically talking about these changes, so if you want to know more, check that video out. But TLDR, his laning phase is stronger now because his E can be maxed first, since again there's not much bonuses to maxing the Q first. So Yasuo has always had a decent wave clear, and that of course remains to be so still. His Q can hit several minions, the static shiv effect can proc and hit more minions, and then you have his tornado which can even hit all 6 of the minions. And the cooldown on this Q if you have max attack speed is very short as well. And the last thing is Yasuo has great scaling into late game and overall just a strong champion in terms of scaling. And the last thing I love about Yasuo is the fact that his ultimate has a very low cooldown, and he does kind of rely on it in order to make the really cool fancy plays, so I really like that. The cons of this champion is the fact that first of all, he's definitely still not as strong as he used to be. We're talking about several patches ago. It can also be quite difficult to get out of a sticky situation with Yasuo, because his E is mainly to be used as an aggressive move, not a defensive one, since the positioning of the minions and champions has to be very ideal in order for you to be able to use the E to get out. Overall, I'm very excited to finally put Yasuo back in the top 5 list, and I really think he deserves this spot now. But let's move on to the number 4 spot where we're going to be looking at Talon, and you're going to be looking at a game from my stream. And yes, I do stream. I have a link in the description below if you want to follow it. For the number 4 spot, I was deciding between Talon and another champion, one champion that you'll actually not see on this list. And I will go over more about that at the end of the video. But let's talk about Talon. He's definitely a champion most people dropped ever since the nerfs to his E. If you are again unaware, his E used to silence his target and not slow, which is a lot better. Now it is the opposite. No longer does it silence, but it does put a heavy slow on the target for a split second. After playing Talon more and more, I've realized that the change on the E really isn't that bad. I mean, sure, it's not as great as the silence because before Talon can go on their target and do more or less his full rotation before that champion has a chance to react. But now going on the target, they can simply flash away, they can blink away, they can use some kind of CC and just peace out. And overall, it is a bit more difficult, but the slow also does have bonuses. For instance, in the laning phase, it's a lot better. If your jungler is coming in for a gank like a Lee Sin or the slow will definitely help that jungler land that very important skill shot. And if your target is missing their escape ability, for instance their jump, their flash, etc., the slow can be a lot more useful. So TLDR, the slow is actually not horrible, but it's not as good, obviously. The other thing is about Talon is, again, his huge burst is still there. Even though the changes did happen, the main thing remains. He's able to 100 to 0 people in a matter of seconds. He still has his wave clear with his W and maybe his ultimate, and on top of that, his ultimate's cooldown is extremely short, much like Yasuo, which is a huge plus for me because it means you can use their ultimate quite often. Whenever a big teamfight erupts, if you play Talon properly, it can be very difficult for the enemy team to stop you from going in on their squishies because you can simply use your ult away from the fight, pop your Yomus while you're invisible, jump on their enemy squishy, and just burst them down, and there's not a whole lot the enemy team can do to stop you from doing it. And the final thing is this Q is still very strong, doing so much damage to towers and just champions in general. The cons, of course, is that his laning phase isn't the strongest, but it's not the worst. But he is very mana intensive, which is why usually getting a flask is good. And GA is a heavy counter to Talon late game. Overall, I'm glad to put Talon back on the list. But let's move into the top 3 champions, and starting it off is the Kali. She's probably one of the most feared assassins in solo queue because she's banned literally every single game. But the reason for her being banned so often is quite obvious. She's just so good at what she does. An assassin's job is obviously to stick on their target and stick on them as much as possible until they're dead. And Akali, thanks to her ultimate, is the best at doing that because the ultimate's range is quite far. And on top of that, she has 3 stacks of her ultimate, which reset upon kill or assist. And another great thing about Akali is the fact that she has great burst and consistent damage, as opposed to someone like a Yasuo who only really has consistent damage and not the best burst, or on the flip side Talon, who's mainly a bursty champion, not a consistent damage dealer. Now, even though Akali isn't as consistent in damage as a Yasuo, nor is she as bursty as a Talon, she's right in between, and that's not a bad thing. Then you have her W, which again is her main spell in terms of just resetting her combos, letting the cooldowns on her skills finish, and just going back in for the fight. If she's getting ganked in the laning phase, her W is also really nice to use. A cool thing also is her W now offers move speed, which definitely makes her more ninja-like, and then you can use her W over walls to reveal fog, or if you're chasing down an opponent and you have no vision. She has probably one of the largest power spikes at level 6. And from this, somewhat relatable is the fact that she snowballs extremely hard, probably the second most snowbally assassin in the game. Let's be honest here, you do not want to see a fed Akali unless she's on your team. The cons is the fact that her pre-6 is not the best. Even though she can harass with her Q, the damage isn't significant. And probably the biggest one is that she's easily countered by pinks or oracles with her W. Overall, a solid champion, one that you'll probably see often in my top 5 lists. But speaking of a champion you'll see often in my list, let's go to the number 2 spot and probably my favorite assassin in the game, Zed. In the previous top 5 assassins list, I actually put Zed as the number 1, but I had to move him down to the number 2. Now it's not because Zed got nerfed. Well, he technically did, just not directly. They recently reduced the cost of QSS or Quicksilver Sash by quite a bit. And if you don't know, QSS is a huge counter to Zed. Let's think about it. The champions that you'll face, for example top lane and jungle, are probably too tanky for you to use your ultimate on and to try to assassinate. The mid laner, chances are, is going to be an AP mid laner, maybe like an Orianna, a Syndra, and if it's a good player, they'll rush a Zhonya's quite early. Using the ultimate on a support can usually be considered a waste, so all that's left is the enemy's ADC. But now that even they can counter you quite easily by getting a QSS that's now so cheap, it just makes it so hard. It really limits Zed's options. But even with all that being said, he's still a very strong champion and he can still do what he has to do. He still has a huge outplay potential, is extremely mobile with the shadows, making so many outplays, has harass, wave clear, has a strong laning phase, and is one of the best split pusher and duelers. But of course, like I said before and I've said many times, he has a huge learning curve. But he's definitely earned the number 2 spot. Alright guys, the number 1 spot, I decided to put Fizz. Now, I don't think I've ever put Fizz in the number 1 spot in any of my top 5 assassins lists, and the main reason was because of his laning phase. But with all the changes happening to other champions, whether it's a nerf, a direct nerf, indirect nerf, or whatever, Fizz has not been touched for so long, and that's not really a bad thing. So let's go into the pros. First of all, like I said earlier, his laning phase is only so-so, but if you're up against certain casters, for example like a Cassiopeia, maybe even a Syndra, if you play it smart and you use your E to dodge their spells, you can do so much damage while avoiding so much damage. So it is a very risky thing because he is going to be pretty much going all in, but if you do it right and you combo your W damage with your ignite damage early on, my goodness, you will do so much damage, and if it works out, you will snowball so damn hard. Fizz is known to have one of the most annoying mobilities of assassins because his E is the only spell that can dodge abilities that is not an ultimate. Then you have his Q, not only giving him some sweet mobility, but his Q also procs on hit effects, and this of course includes the 2 major things such as his W and Lich Bane. His W has ridiculous damage and scaling. I mean, considering the fact that you maxed it last and it still manages to do so much damage is just absurd. His ultimate is great for setting up a kill because of the slow that it provides and also giving vision of any target, so for instance if you're facing a Kali or a Talon. And in my opinion, I do honestly think Fizz is the best scaling assassin in the game. This is the champion I don't want to see fed. I'd rather see a Kali fed than a Fizz. The cons of this little guy is the fact that his ultimate, if you're not used to it, can be a little awkward to land. He has no ranged wave clear, and pretty much every other assassin does, except for a Kali, I guess. And the laning phase, like I said, is not the best. It's a little risky, and you have to go for some crazy plays if you want to come out on top. But if you take the risk and you are successful, man are you rewarded. So I'm pretty excited to finally put this guy in the #1 spot. Alright guys, so that marks the end of my top 5 assassins list for patch 4.21. I'm sure some of you may have noticed I have not included Katarina in this list, considering the fact that I put her, I believe, in the #2 or 3 spot in my last video. Well, her early game got nerfed once again, so getting rolling with a Katarina is just so much harder now, and I feel like all the other assassins and champions I mentioned are just better. But again, that's it for this video guys. If you did enjoy, please throw in a like, share it with your friends, and then I hope to see you for the next one as well. Also check out my other videos as well, and I hope you guys enjoy them just as much, if not more. Peace!